Hey everyone, I'm Sid. I'm a co-founder and CEO here at GitLab, and this is an AMA, and you've put in 8 questions already, for which I'm very grateful. Dan, do you want to verbalize your question? Dan's not here, I'll read it up for him. Am I concerned about potential legal action from another company? We did an internal investigation. That turned out that we think that we're in the right, that we did the right thing. If there's legal action from another company, the first thing we'll do is reach out to an external counsel to kind of redo the internal investigation to make sure that we're 100% sure and we're not just biased towards ourselves and we have someone else check that. So you want to verbalize your question?
Hi, Sid. I literally came in. Sorry, I was a little bit late. Yeah, I was just curious to see how happy you are with how we've scaled as a company, culture-wise, but also communications-wise. Could you have imagined what it was going to be like, and are you happy with how we're currently operating?
Yeah, thanks for that. And you were just on time. It's going much better there than I anticipated. Many people said you'll hit various types of walls at 150, 300 people, 400 people. We haven't hit those walls. And I think, for example, the reinforcement of our values is going much better than I ever dared to dream. Most companies the values kind of dilute as they get bigger. I think for us, they get more concentrated. People are more aware, are seeing that we make decisions based on them. So that's been a great help. I think the biggest problem I see is in kind of reinforcement of practices. For example, we have the practice of short meetings, but I'm hearing from new people joining the company that most of the meetings they have are not short meetings. So they don't get time for a bio break. They don't have time for a snack. They don't have time to respond to an urgent message in between meetings. I think that's not good. That's stressful. It's I would almost say inhumane, but it's not that dire, but it's not good. So we're trying to solve that, make sure that checking that box in Google Calendar is something that's in the onboarding, giving more explanations of why we do it. Another thing is, for example, YouTube visibility. It's going really well with posting more to the YouTube Unfiltered program. For example, people post it unlisted, which it should be. It should be either private just for the people at the company, or it should be public. So it's like these day-to-day things, and I now sometimes feel like I'm kind of the enforcer, and it shouldn't be. It's annoying for people if it's a CEO who says something. It has a bigger impact on them than it would just be a coworker. But I'm not seeing people speak up. I'm not seeing people speak up in meetings about it, and I wonder how we can incentivize that, or whether. I'd hate it for it to be like a separate role that someone would be the enforcer in the company, like of our communication practices. So I'm thinking about that, but I don't have a solution, and I'm open to suggestions. Lyle, do you want to verbalize your question? Lyle asked, do you think there's an upper limit to the handbook-first approach? More contributions means more changes. Will there be a point where employees can no longer keep up? That's a great point. I don't think there's a limit to it. I think if you don't write it down, you have to apparently learn through the grapevine, which is way more inefficient. I don't think it should be a goal that everyone can read the entire handbook. That's obviously not going to scale. It's over 2,000 pages now. I haven't read all of it. So I think it's very important to kind of consume on demand, what and when you need it. And if you, like, for example, work in engineering, you probably, during your onboarding, you're not going to read all the stuff about marketing and sales. It's available for you if you need it, or if you need to collaborate, or if you're wondering about something. So it's very important that the organization of the handbook is right, and that there's lots of cross links.
I think one of the weaknesses I see, Sid, is that as the handbook grows, it becomes more and more like law and less like a suggestion, and people start using it sort of as a weapon almost in discussions where it's like, well, the handbook says this, and we start arguing about like a specific word. And I don't know if that was the intent.
Oh, that's a great remark. Thanks for that. I hope it's on the handbook usage page, but the handbook is a guidebook. It's not a law book. It's not what you should do. It's like, hey, we thought about this previously. This is what we came up with last time. But you should use your judgment. And if there's a better way to do it, just do it the better way. And if you think that better way applies to other people too, which should be the case in 99% of the cases, just change the handbook. What's not good is like if you're not even aware what the handbook says and you haven't really given a lot of thought to the problem and you just do something, that's not ideal. Like then a coworker will say, hey, well, this is what the handbook says. And the response should be, hey, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know. I'll probably change it. But if you read the handbook and you're like, well, in this case, it's different. That's why we hire people and not robots executing the handbook. You should always use judgment, and it's a hint. It's not. It's most of the sections are not the law. I think we have a code of conduct that is legal, but all of the other things are not. So maybe it's important to even separate that more, saying like, hey, the code of conduct is the only part of the handbook. That is something you should always adhere to, and all the other things are optional. They're just suggestions. For example, I just mentioned short meetings. If you intentionally make a meeting 60 minutes because you think it's a way better fit, that's great. I don't argue with that. If you make it 60 minutes because it's a default in Google Calendar, you just didn't know that we have a practice of short meetings, that's not great. And so you're allowed to deviate from it. Clement, do you want to verbalize your question? So Clement asked about the CEO Shadow Initiative and what inspired it. I think I wrote down the goal. So I'll screen share that a bit. The goal of the program is to give current and future directors and senior leaders an overview of all the aspects of the company. This leads to leadership who is able to do global optimizations. We want leaders at GitLab who don't just see their specific department, but who have an understanding of how the entire company works and how they can make an improvement that benefits the entire company. But that's pretty hard if you haven't seen the entire company. And as we grow bigger, it's not just the executive team that we need to grow. Actually, it was an eye-opener. One of our advisors in South Africa said, look, now your executive team is good, it's great, it's all fine, but it's about that next generation of leaders growing those. So I'm optimizing for that. I'm reducing my privacy, and Erika Lindberg is on a, you can watch her day 2 video, and it's a very tiring thing to do. But I think the outcome is pretty awesome, where she has a much better understanding of the company, and she's also making edits to the handbook left and right while she goes through it. Philippe, want to verbalize your question?
Sure, thank you. And for the record, this is something I asked maybe 6 months ago already, but I have the feeling that the answer might be different this time. How do we ensure that we're not slowing down? Because I think that's one of your biggest fear for GitLab.
Yeah, so in engineering, engineering is harder to measure. Like sales is pretty quantitative. They close IACV. Marketing generates pipeline. They're both doing okay. We're both kind of tracking to plan. Engineering, the main metric I focus on is merge request per engineer per month. And we've seen that number slip from 10 to about 7.7. Now you could say like, it's easy to game that number, but actually if you game that number, you're gonna split up work in more merge requests, which is something we want people to do because we know it makes people faster. So please game this number. I was concerned, and Eric was also concerned. So Eric, our VP of engineering, now started an initiative to like figure out what's happening and why it's going down. But already we're seeing the effect of focusing on it. And for this month, it's looking pretty good. We're up to low digits, which means that for the month, we're going to get pretty close back to 10. So one of the things was that we weren't counting things that security fixes that were happening in a private repo. So we fixed that, but still like very afraid of us slowing down. And the most important thing is like, are there roadblocks? Like an incremental new person coming in, do they have an easier or a harder time contributing to our code base? So we're keeping an eye on all those factors, trying to be informed by quantitative things and measure. But that doesn't mean that if you see something that you think should be better, please go to Eric because he's super interested in it, and so am I.
Thanks.
Igor, thanks for that. Igor, you want to verbalize your question?
Yeah, thanks, Sid. So what feature of GitLab do you think still needs to be added according to your opinion? That's one.
Well, the biggest missing thing that we have on our homepage is our defend category. So we have kind of the proactive security in GitLab, where you test your code, you test for vulnerabilities, you do all these things before you release something. But still, you might miss something. And we also need reactive security. When people are able to like penetrate your application, you want to be able to detect that, to respond to that. And that defense is missing. And I'm really excited. The secure team, I think, is shipping the first thing in defense, even though we don't have a team for it yet. They're going to start with, I think, the web application firewall. So at least we have one of those features. And I look forward to that being like our 10th stage. Want to talk about your next question?
Yeah. If you could or had to choose between the Netherlands or US, what country would it be?
Oh, there's both have benefits and drawbacks. For me personally, I don't plan to move from the US, and the main thing is that it's not so much the US, but San Francisco, which has a very high concentration of very talented and ambitious people, and kind of the infrastructure to enable them. And I think that's very fascinating. I love like organization building, and the speed with which it happens here and the scale is amazing. Like yesterday, I was at a dinner party, and like you talk to a person who's making a slingshot, which can send stuff into space. So like they carve out a big mountain, they whirl something really fast, and then they accelerate it fast enough in vacuum that they open up the tube, send the thing out, and it's going to fly through the atmosphere and come in a geostation, not geostationary, but come in an orbit around the planet, so it doesn't immediately drop down. That's just berserk. But yeah, there's the dinner parties where you meet those people in between all the SaaS apps and all the other stuff. Suri asked for someone to verbalize. I think people should listen to Suri, so waiting for the first volunteer.
What is the best part of your day?
I love our group conversations a lot. Seeing kind of the progress. I think the most motivational thing in work is progress. Progress in what you produce, in your career, in the company as a whole, maybe even in the industry. So group conversations, if I have a good day, it's the first thing I do, and I don't have any meetings before it, and I can sport a bit. And then it starts off with a group conversation where people are talking about how they're advancing the goals of one department. I think that's great. Also, I get to ask questions, so I like that aspect. But that's my favorite part of the day. Jefferson, you want to verbalize your question?
Yeah, I heard that we'll be only keeping 90 days of data in Slack going forward. And I was wondering, is that the reason for that, to reinforce those best practices that we share about transparency and collaboration? Is that kind of the reason why we did it? And if that's the case, are we wanting more people to do more merge requests and more discussions within issues rather than Slack? I know that with Slack, and I'm sorry to jump in, I know with Slack, private DMs is on the rise, right? And I feel like that kind of goes against the company norms and values a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's not the reason we're doing it, but it might be a good side effect. The reason we're doing it is that our informal communication happens on Slack to a large extent. Where other companies, it's kind of walking the hallways. For us, it's on Slack. Imagine how weird it would be that you come into the office and you come by the security guard, and the first thing they do, they put a microphone on you, you're recorded for the entire day, and they keep all the recordings. That's a bit how Slack feels to me, and I don't think it's appropriate considering how we use the medium. I do hope that it's not why we do it, but it would be great if we get more things asynchronous in issues and merge requests. Slack is like a day-long meeting, like a meeting that's always happening, and the more we can get out of that, the better. And especially bad is the use of DMs. So by sending someone a DM, you put a certain urgency on it, like it's hard to see history. And worse, like every coworker cannot see what's happening. Like people are forced to sit in open floor plan office buildings so that they can kind of overhear what colleagues are doing. Luckily, we don't have that. We have peace and quiet. But what we need from individual people is like, if you need something from someone, post it in a public channel and mention the person so other people can see what's going on, because that helps us coordinate. So hopefully that will happen more. Drew, you want to verbalize your question?
Sorry, can I just interrupt, please?
Sure. Yes, that's great. It's incredible.
With Slack and getting rid of everything that's over 90 days old, can we keep all the data that we have in the questions channel and put it into some kind of a knowledge base? Yeah,
I think what it says in the questions channel, that to thank the person that answered the question, you should make an edit to the handbook. Right now, that's not happening. So I don't think there's any sense in going back. I think it's more about going forward. We should treat Slack as a fungible resource. No one's gonna, using Slack search to find something is not a great experience. You need it kind of in the appropriate place in the handbook. And that should be our modus operandi, treating it as a fungible thing and thanking the person who answered the question by saying, great, I edited this to the handbook in the place I searched for it.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
True. I think I was next, unless we don't want to answer this, but just to hop in here. Number 10 was, do you see remote-only organizations becoming sort of more accepted and commonplace? I've personally had multiple people reach out to me to sort of try to figure out how we work, how effectively we can work remote at such scale, because other folks are having problems. Now they're multi-site, not fully remote, but clearly they're seeing problems in that workflow. And yeah, I'm just curious I imagine you get tons and tons of inbound on this stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm open to do pick my brain meetings. I put them on YouTube unfiltered. I did another one, I think, yesterday. All remote is gonna be the new trend. Like first it broke down having everyone in one location. Now they're seeing that like half remote hybrid companies don't really work. So all remote is gonna be a big thing over the next few years. And we're leading in that. We're not the biggest all remote company, but we're pretty close. And we're much more public about what we do. And we're pretty thoughtful about how we run the organization. So there's an enormous opportunity for us to lead the way here. And by virtue of that, be seen as a great place to work for, help with our employer brand and attract more great new people. So I'm trying to contribute there as much as I can. Betsy is trying to help there by improving our all remote culture page. And I think it's it's also something I expect an incoming chief people officer to help with. But in the meantime, please do, if you find something like if record those talks, tweet about it, etc. Spread the word. It shouldn't be just me. Every one of us should be an ambassador for remote work. And sorry for skipping over you. Thanks for speaking up. Drew, you have the next question.
Yeah. So I've gotten various estimates of like 800 to 1,000 people from different people at the company. But when we're going to scale up in headcount so drastically, are there changes that you see coming that we're actively going to make? Do you think there's like adaptations that are going to intentionally happen, or are we going to try and maintain as far as we can and just kind of correct for what ends up happening?
Yeah, thanks for that. The planning for the end of the fiscal year, so end of January, is over 1,100 people. So we're likely to be over 1,000 people at that point. We'll iterate on it. There's no drastic changes, I think, but as we get bigger, there's more layers of management, and we need to accommodate for that. As we hire more people, onboarding is more important. So provisioning systems automatically instead of 50 checkboxes in your onboarding issue is something we'll be working on. So all kinds of changes. I don't think there's anything fundamental that will be broken, but maybe we'll find out and we'll try to fix it if that comes up.
Cool. Thank you.
Nice. Thanks, sir. Thomas's question is, as a company, we value velocity over predictability. How are you personally balancing those two items? By doing the minimum thing. So many times when I have an idea, I will not spend a lot of time on it. I will just put it as a suggestion to a relevant report of me. And they also hopefully, luckily, most of the time they do a minimal thing to kind of change the process or make a change. And many times, hopefully, and luckily they say, I won't do that, which also helps. But instead of having a few things that I spend a lot of time on, I try to be the eyes and ears. I meet a lot of people. I'm in a unique position. So I want to kind of share that information with the rest of the company and with my reports as much as possible. So for example, yesterday there was an email I got that I thought might be relevant. I just copy pasted it in the CEO channel so that everyone in the company can see it. Matt B, you want to verbalize your question?
Yeah, with a lot of new stuff coming this year, what are you most excited about for Contribute 2019?
Yeah, I'm excited. It's every time it turns out to be a great experience. So I have high expectations. It's compared to last time, it's bigger, so that's going to be interesting. It's also, we got a much bigger corporate marketing events team. So there's more space for it will be better branded than the last time. We have an event system. We have better systems in place. So it's going to feel more like a produced event, which is also exciting. I hope we can keep the intimacy of the excursions and the unconference setting, but it's going to be awesome to see how it's better produced and whether we can keep those things at scale. Simon, want to verbalize your question?
Sure. Hi, Sid. What were your biggest learnings from OSLS?
Yeah, maybe someone can link my presentation from OSLS. I think what Amazon did with Elasticsearch, fork and commoditized, that is putting the whole commercial open source software model on its head. Everyone was expecting this to come, but it's now happening where the hyperclouds are competing with the commercial open source software companies and are commoditizing the things they charge for. I think that's a very interesting development. I'm not particularly happy with it, but I think it's Amazon is doing what they should be doing. It's in their users' interest. And as a company, we'll have to try to accommodate that. I made a presentation about how I think our bio-based open core model helps a bit there. Christopher, want to verbalize your question?
Sure thing, Sid. Do we have another Meltano type of initiative being considered? Just curious if there's thoughts about expanding the company's breadth, different directions.
Yep. No. Currently, we have no ideas for other products. Not saying no to them. If we find a great idea, we'll do that. I think the biggest initiative under my consideration is what we do in China. Whether we keep a distance, whether we partner, whether we go at it ourselves, or whether we kind of launch a new startup there. I think there's a China doc that everyone can find with our current thoughts. So I'm spending some cycles there, and that's kind of $1 million, maybe $10 million decision. Hugo, want to verbalize your question? Hugo asked, any thoughts on the announcement about Atlassian acquiring AgileCraft?
Yeah, I don't know if you heard about that yesterday, sorry.
Yeah, for sure. I think it shows that there's a big need for customers to have value stream analytics, to have those, to have like a high level roadmap. And I think it confirms that customers need that, and that we're right in adding that in our plan stage. We have agile portfolio management, value stream management, and this confirms that there's a lot of demand for that, and that we should keep shipping that. And Atlassian is now becoming a company of more and more separate products that you have to kind of integrate together, which I think helps to contrast it with the GitLab approach of a single application that we think yields a lot of benefits by able to see information in context and not have these handoffs.
Thank you.
Well, Mia, you want to verbalize your question?
Yeah, sure. So my question is, since we are doubling in headcount every year, I would like to hear your thoughts about making more with less.
Yeah. I think it's not inevitable, but it is okay. As long as our revenue keeps close to tripling, our headcount keeps slightly more than doubling, I think that's fine. We don't have to be worried about that. We should keep an eye on the revenue. But I do want every single person to have as big of an impact as other people got. And hey, you're on the test automation team. Your team is doing a great job of like obsessing over the health of our testing environment and making sure that people don't get red tests if they haven't made a mistake. That's super important. We want to keep everyone effective. And I mentioned earlier, 10 merge requests per engineer per month. Like that's the kind of stats we keep an eye on to see like are people being dragged down by additional stuff they have to do. Because yeah, our test seat is going to grow. Yes, the security requirements are going to increase. Yes, we're going to be FIP certified and all these things in the future. Yes, we'll be a public company and we have to incorporate all those things. We want to incorporate that and make people more effective, not less. More effective because we automate it more, because there's better onboarding, there's fewer roadblocks, there's people watching out for certain things, so you don't all have to do that. So that's going to be interesting to try to keep that speed. Thanks everyone. We're at the end of time. Maybe see you in the company call. Thanks again for all the questions. Really appreciate it.